Stanky plump. You do. Well, it's time to crip walk. It's the crip walk.
Hi everyone, my name is Monique and I lived in my Buick Encore for 3 years and then I totaled my Buick, so I got a Ford Transit Connect after that, and I have been converting it with my dad to build it into a little tiny home for myself. I have to say that installing the walls in this van was my least favorite part of everything. I highly disliked it. It was so time consuming. It seemed so simple, and for a lot of people it probably was simple. But this 2022 Ford Transit Connect, it has so many, like, the wall is not straight. There's all types of protrusions. There's this really big protrusion on each side of the van that just sticks out. I don't know what it's for. It seems so useless, but I'm sure it has some kind of purpose. But it just made it so hard to build a wall with these things that stick out. When you see the final walls in this van, they are not pretty. They are far from perfect. They are highly imperfect because the walls in my van are just so oddly shaped. It just made it difficult. These walls just took way longer to build than I thought they would. And I also want to say that because I just want to let other people know that just because you see a little 10 to 20 minute video of van build and things seem to go right, a lot of stuff goes wrong. You have to redo things over and over and over. You have to measure so many times. You have to cut things so many times. You can measure 5 times and then sometimes you will still get the measurement incorrect. Sometimes you feel a little deflated. You feel a little defeated when you have to do things over so many times. But the other videos that you watched online, it made it seem like they got it like the first, second, or even third try. You know, it's not always the first, second, or third try. I'm telling you. Even for the people whose videos made it seem that way. A lot of us have to just edit that stuff out, otherwise our videos would be so long. If we showed every mistake we did and every time we had to redo everything, these videos would be so long. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's something that my dad and I noticed during this build. We were like, we can't be the only ones going through this. So I wanted to say that for anyone who does their van build, you know, don't feel like it's just you. It's most likely all of us. I feel like a lot of us have one thing in our van build that just gave us the most frustration. And for me, it was the walls. Framing the walls and installing the actual wall. So to begin, we are creating a template for the walls using some cardboard. We measured each wall and then we just made a rectangular shaped template that was the size of the wall. The pieces of cardboard that we had were smaller than the walls, so we had to connect 2 pieces of cardboard together. Then we put it up against the wall and my dad started tracing the wall on the cardboard and cutting sections out. Here I am holding the cardboard against the wall while my dad traces out the wheel well, which was a lot more difficult than it looked. And this is what we got. Then I cut out the areas that my dad traced. Now it was time to put it against the wall and adjust everything and do that 100,000 times over and over again.
This thing will go all the way through.
This is the annoying protrusion I was speaking of that I have on both walls. Eventually, we were satisfied with the template. Then it was time to do it all over again for the second wall. It took one whole day to do the first template. Literally that entire day, all we did was work on the template. And after that, we were done. So we didn't do the second template until the next day.
Hot here.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The bag's on there. Once the second template was done, we put them both on top of a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, traced the template, and then used a jigsaw to cut out the wall. Once the walls were cut, we went through the same process as we did with the templates. We put it against the van wall and made a gazillion adjustments. And we had to keep taking the wall out, cutting stuff, putting it back in, make more adjustments, taking it out, cutting it, and it just took forever. At this point of the van build, it became very frustrating and I honestly forgot to record some of it. But you can see this is what the framing wood looked like before and here's what it looks like now. We had to add a lot of pieces to it because when we kept pressing our wall against the framing wood, like the nails weren't reaching. We would stick a nail through the wall and it wouldn't reach the framing wood. So we bolted more framing wood on top of the wood that we had already put there so that the wall would touch the framing wood and we could actually screw it to something, if that makes sense.
And if you see that it's not recessing it all the way in, then you go a click or two. The higher the number, the more torque it's going to force it in. The lower the number, the less chances of it just going straight through the wall.
Okay.
Okay. Tighten it up a little more. Feels like it would there. It didn't tighten though, did it?
Mm-mm.
There you go, that's good. Don't go in for it.
I was so over filming by the time we finished the walls. So this footage here is actually months later. When I was editing this video, I realized I didn't have footage of the wall when it was finished. So this is it. You'll see a lot of holes in the wall, but my dad thought that was a good idea so that I could reach these wires here in case I ever needed to use them for anything. So the wall does not look the prettiest. There's holes everywhere, uneven cuts. But like I said earlier in the video, I'm gonna put like a cabinet right there, and it's going to cover up all of that. It's going to cover that little protrusion there and all of these little holes, and it will look just fine. These solar panels were not meant to be mounted on top of a vehicle, but they were the solar panels that I had, so they were the ones that I used. Musa had actually purchased these solar panels a few years ago, and I already had the Goal Zero power station that I used when I first moved into my car. So even though it made things a little bit more complicated trying to mount these solar panels on top of a vehicle instead of getting ones that were actually made for that, it ended up making more sense because we didn't have to spend money. I saved several $100s by using what I already had. My van came with these holes that were pre-drilled on the roof, and they're covered by these rubber thingies. So the first thing we did was remove 3 of the rubber thingies on 3 of the holes so that we could use those holes to install the roof rack. And they were a little difficult to remove, some of them, so we used a hair dryer to loosen them up. We saw that in another YouTube video, and it worked.
I'm gonna take one of these good ones and
next, we put these things called spacers in each hole. Once we made sure they fit, we put butyl tape underneath each of the spacers. The bottom of the spacer goes through the van, and to keep that from moving, we put a washer on the bottom of the spacer, followed by a lock nut. And then we used a socket wrench to tighten everything up, and that kept the spacer from moving around. After that, we used some sealant and sealed around the spacer.
it's not gonna be pretty, but
We used unistruts to build our rack for the solar panels, and not all of the holes were aligned directly above the holes on the van, so we had to drill some of the holes a little bit bigger. Then we filed the holes and we sprayed them so that they would not rust.
get a little closer.
We needed large washers that would fit inside the unistrut, and this would go right above the spacers that we added, and then we were going to put a screw in them. But the washers were a little too big, so we had to file down the sides so that they would fit inside the unistrut perfectly. We put the unistrut on top of the spacers. We slid the washers that we filed into the unistrut and made sure that each washer was directly over the spacer. We put a bolt into the spacer and used a socket wrench to tighten it, and this is what it looked like. Each spacer had a bolt screwed in it. Okay, I hope the next part of this solar panel rack install makes sense, but these are the things we used next. We slid them into the unistrut, one on each end, like a couple inches from the edge of the unistrut. And then we used this thing. I'll try to find the name and put a link in it. And we also used these square magnetic washers and a bolt. And this is what we needed for the next part of the solar rack build. So once we slid the cone nut in, we put that L-shaped washer looking thing on top of it. And then we put a square magnetic washer on top of that. And the reason for this is because we don't want the solar panel to touch the roof of the van when you're driving. It could bounce and scrape up the top of your car. So it's important to make sure that your solar panel is high enough above the roof of the van so that that doesn't happen. Then we're going to put another unistrut perpendicular to the two that we have on the side of the van, and we put a washer and a screw inside the unistrut and used a socket wrench to tighten that down. So just to recap, we put the unistrut across the first two that we added that go on the side of the van. We put an L-shaped washer underneath it. We chose an L shape because it would just add a little bit more support to the unistrut. And then we put the square washer on top of that. And then we put a bolt and a washer through those holes and screwed it down. Now it's time to prepare the solar panels. So we have to unscrew all of the hinges, and that's what we're doing now. Then we installed these Z-brackets onto these solar panels. We put a total of 4 Z-brackets on each panel, 2 on each side. We put blue painter's tape underneath each bracket and marked where we would have to drill holes, and then we drilled holes. We started with a smaller drill bit and then went up a size and then went up to the final size. We put washers on top of each hole and then a bolt inside of the hole. Underneath each bolt we put a washer, a lock washer, and a lock nut. I don't know if we needed all 3, but my dad wanted to be extra sure that they did not come out, so we put the washer plus the lock washer and the lock nut. And we forgot to add Loctite, so we went and unscrewed everything and then squeezed in some Loctite. And then we put a wrench underneath to hold the lock nut while we used a socket wrench to tighten everything.
So we're going to set this, bolt this down. It's going to be loose, but we're going to flip it over first.
Okay.
All the way down. Slide one all the way to here so we can put a bolt in it. And then you're going to slide the other one right up underneath this so we can put a bolt in it. That other one right up underneath it. Get started into the thing. Make sure it's got enough threads on it too. Oh, it's got more than that. You had it in there, you just had to keep pushing it.
Oh, okay. Once the panels were on the roof, we put a washer underneath each Z-bracket and one on top. I don't know why we did one underneath it, but that's what we did. And then we put Loctite onto the bolt and we tightened the bolt into the cone nut because each Z-bracket was directly over a cone nut. Once all the Z-brackets were bolted down, we put a bolt into the middle unistrut on each end where the square washers are, just to make sure that the ends of that unistrut were secure. And then we used another one of the pre-drilled holes. We had to make it bigger so that we could fit the wires through it. We filed the hole and sprayed it so that it doesn't rust. And then that's a housing unit, I think it's called, for the wires to go through so that they don't get wet when it rains. We had to put butyl tape underneath our housing unit, followed by some sealant. And then we put more sealant around the housing unit. This housing unit came with a little piece that covers the hole that the wires go through so that, rain and water can't get inside. But our wires were too big, the hole was too big. At the end of it all, we couldn't use that piece, so we ended up stuffing the hole with butyl tape and then putting sealant all around it, and it's been working for months. While editing this video, I realized I didn't tell you guys how many of these unistruts that we have going this way. There's 3. There's this one here, and then there's one right in the middle in between the 2 solar panels. They go across, and then there's one at the end that goes across. So the 2 unistruts on the end, this one and the one over there, they have the L-shaped bracket plus the the L-shaped washer plus the square washer, and then the washer, the circular washer plus the bolt that goes through here. It's the same on this side, on that side, and it's exactly the same on that unistrut and on the opposite side. the unistrut in the middle that goes across just has 2 square washers. I don't know why we chose to only do the square ones here. I think we ran out of the L-shaped ones and we didn't want to make a 1 millionth trip to Home Depot that day. So this one just got 2 of the square washers. And I am recording this video months after installing the solar panels, and I can tell you, like, this thing is sturdy. Like, I've been driving places and it's not going anywhere. So I really hope this video is helpful, because if you have no clue where to start with your solar panel installation, I hope it helps, because it really does work well. Someone in my previous video asked if I can link the videos that I watched when I learned how to convert my van. And I think I'm gonna make my private playlist public, because there's just so many videos. Not many people had the type of Ford Transit Connect that I have. It was very hard to find conversion videos with my type of Ford Transit Connect, especially the one that had those little protrusions on the wall, because I really was curious to see how other people dealt with that when building their walls and just building anything around it. So my dad and I winged a lot of stuff. We combined a little bit from each video that we watched, and then we just did our own thing. That's really what I think many of you will have to do. I'm trying to make my videos kind of thorough, but honestly, the further along I got in the van build, the less enthusiastic I was because I was just so over it. Like, after the walls, I was just really getting over it. I needed a break, really. I just needed a break. So I wasn't recording as much. I would just forget sometimes. Yeah, I tried to make the videos as thorough as I can, but really the point of this is just to take whatever you can from it, watch a gazillion other videos, and just take from each of us, and then you will figure it out and you'll come up with your own way of doing things. So I don't have a specific video that I watched on how to install my floor or how to install my walls, because we couldn't find anyone with my exact van and dimensions and everything who installed a floor and installed a wall. So I would just make the videos that I watched and I put them all in the playlist. I will make that public, and you can just scroll through all of them and, you know, see what you find helpful. And yeah, I'll do that. So this video was kind of long, but I hope you found it helpful. Just thank you for sticking around with my channel. Thank you for watching the ads, whoever watches the ads. And yeah, I appreciate you all, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.